There is a magical operation of maximum importance, the initiation of a new aeon. When it becomes necessary to utter a word, the whole planet must be bathed in blood.
Hello viewers, join me now on another special edition of Righteous Gaming. If you listen to my intro, I'm sure you have a hint of the game I'm going to talk about today. So let's get right into it. This is my unexpected impression of Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen 2. The first game, Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, was once and still stands as one of my favorite PlayStation games. The protagonist's raw magical abilities allow players to experience the power of a vampire whose thirst for blood is almost as great as his hunger to destroy the men who murdered him. The game has its share of performance errors, such as frame drops and frequent load times, but the top-down action is some of the best around, and Gauntlet or Diablo is no substitute. The feel of the game is known to me so well that I can tell when its remake or sequel is only showing face of the concept. Blood Omen 2 does a good job of reflecting the audio and sights of its prequel, but unfortunately, this is where the relativity ends. Legacy of Kain Blood Omen 2 almost intends to be different, hence the Blood Omen tag now being placed at the end of the title. I don't really know why that is necessary, unless Crystal Dynamics wanted the sequel to relate more to Raziel's story than Kain's. It sort of reminds me of how Square Enix always puts the Final Fantasy tag at the end of their spin-off titles. And why is the trilogy called the Legacy of Kain series? Blood Omen Legacy of Kain was a single game created by Silicon Knights, which gave players the option to save or claim dominion over the world. The origin story was complete in itself, but who would not want to experience the sequel, which reveals what happened to Nosgoth afterwards? In Omen 2, Kain chooses dominion over Nosgoth and raises a vampire army to take on his rival. Kain's rival, the Seraphim Lord as he's called, defeats Kain in battle and takes Kain's weapon, the Soul Reaver, as a trophy. Kain falls into chrono-sleep and thereby loses his powers, where upon awakening he is met by a mysterious vampire woman who volunteers to aid him in his recovery. The story is fair, but I find it hard to believe that Kain will lose his powers that easily, and Kain is not only weaker, but controls awkwardly too. If there's anything to take from the original game, Kain has an effective mixture of passive and destructive abilities, giving him a satisfying edge over the groups of deadly monsters and enemies he will face. In Blood Omen 2, Kain controls like Raziel from the Soul Reaver games. Instead of attacking freely, he must aim at the enemy with R1 and do a 3-hit scratch combo by mashing square. Holding down the L1 trigger to guard may also be wise, as enemies have the urgency to attack as soon as you are seen. Like Raziel, Kain can pick up enemy weapons and use them to compensate for his lack of power. However, the weapons will break over use, causing Kain to fight with his claws yet again. There is also a dodge option that you can use to strafe slightly to either side. It's clear the game wants you to use your guard though, since the dodge doesn't range too far at all. Kain's grapple move was virtually useless to me, but you can challenge me as to whether that is the case. The control scheme in Blood Omen 2 is quite complicated and becomes adaptable as you fight on. There is enough action taking place to grow accustomed to the Souls-like stiffness if you don't let it frustrate you.
Hey Cloud, want some ice cream to cool down? Or are you looking for something hot? Just admit it.
Mistform is back from the original game, and in Blood Omen 2, it is called the Dark Gift. Mistform can be used to become invisible, but now in a different way. In the prequel, Mistform allows the player to avoid enemies and seep through barred gateways. In Blood Omen 2, You will use Mistform for stealth takedowns, but only in areas where fog is on the ground. The form has a puzzling twist now, giving the player an opportunity to take the enemy out instantly. With combat being the way it is, it felt easier taking advantage of this option whenever I could. It was fun for a while, till the game started making me focus carefully with the back attacks. At this stage, my opponents would find me no matter how sneaky, so I gave up using stealth altogether.
Prepare to die. Prepare to die.
You also can't use a dark gift while holding down the lock-on button. You will have to let that button go and press circle respectively. The same principle applies for sucking blood too. And there is now no heartbeat to prompt you as to when. You must wait for the red highlight to pop up on the victim's body after letting go of the lock-on. I suppose this was to correct the overfeeding idea from the first game.
That way. They are the means to an orderly society.
My father says.
Oh, you and your father. Don't you see? The order and discipline the
While linear in comparison to the original, Blood Omen 2 does well on world design. It takes place in the never-before-seen city of Meridian, where hostile Seraphim protect the streets from the vampire threat. I just can't understand how a vampire sword mage like Kain, someone who cleared the entire streets of Nosgoth, could be this weak against a couple of Seraphim guards at a time. The vampire version of Kain in Blood Omen 2 seems weaker than he was as a human. Kain's traders are also much stronger and faster than he is, thanks to their evolution during Kain's time in suspension. Kain's traders are the bosses in Blood Omen 2, and the first one has a power reminiscent to Kain's old wolf form. The boss moves untouchably, dodging and easily avoiding your haymakers as if you were in mud. I'm able to slow time down so I can move about, quick as a wolf, while all others move as though they are mired in mud. Since you move slower while locking onto him, all you can do to dodge his attacks is a slow 3-second stray, a breakable block, or pounce around like you're stepping on lava. I think the limitation is ridiculous, and you could possibly wait minutes before the Speedo finally drops his guard against you. It took me many tries, but I finally beat him and absorbed his dark gift. The gift only allows you to jump huge gaps, similar to the first game. The difference, though, is that it doesn't really enhance your basic jump. You may only use the jump selectively by choosing the jump option from your menu. This means the jump is tied to puzzle solving and cannot be used freely as it once was. The form from the first game allows Kain to not only move swiftly like a wolf, but also transform into and fight as one.
The order and discipline the Seraphim impose on the lower orders are for everyone's good. They respect us. They know their place.
My father says there was a time when the great noble families ruled the land, with a king over all.
It's just the same now. The Seraphim Lord.
But we, the nobles of the land, are not being permitted to have a proper influence upon affairs.
Speak for yourself.
We cringe and we pay.
The lore is either hit or miss, but the game has good art direction. I really like the banter in the streets of Meridian. The streets are empty most of the time, and the few citizens there make the city feel like there are still people living their lives.
I am so sorry.
The world design is better than I anticipated. There are some cool Legacy of Kain teases, such as the Help Me Kain serve prisoners, and the game at times makes it apparent that there could have been more done to make it closer to LOK's art style. For example, what type of Legacy of Kain encounter would you expect in the sewer area of Blood Omen 2? It looks as if purple slimes would be coming out of the pipes at any moment. But I was disappointed to find more Seraphim goons and a block puzzle at the tunnel exit. We should keep in mind also that the puzzles are not simply switch-based anymore. Most of the puzzles I encountered were brain-dead easy, but the one in the sewer is premeditated, almost as if the developers wanted players to know that the simplicity was deliberate. Now, I'm not a big solving puzzles type of guy, but I was not expecting many of them in Blood Omen 2. Thankfully, puzzles don't factor in too heavily here, but it leaves evidence that the team may have debated on it. I must debate myself on the combat mode, which falls into the RPG category, even though it appears to be completely action. If an enemy is charging his power attack, you have to dodge it some way. You can't counter with a basic attack of your own, so in those battle moments, it feels like a momentum-based battle card game. Omen 1 is an action RPG that is really an action game all the way through. Combat is never tricky, like this. Enemies in LOK always fight the way you recall, without any random side abilities. The enemies in Omen 2 are too much of a threat for me to see this as being a dedicated sequel to Kain's legacy. Most Omen 2 encounters have you faced with 2 Seraphim guards at a time, which is less than the 3 to 5 you will cut down in the original. But even so, the 2 enemies pose a greater challenge due to Kain's newfound stiffness. Again, Dark Gift Mist seems to work against me. The fog is placed strategically in a lot of areas where the enemy is too close to the fog's inlet, causing me to be spotted more easily. It's sort of like the original Tomb Raider, when the high HP gunman chases you around the room and you can't put him down fast enough to avoid getting shot. This may be acceptable in Tomb Raider, but it doesn't vibe as well in Legacy of Kain, at least not in my opinion. There is also an audio error worth mentioning. Voice dialogue and cinematic sequence is often low and hard to hear. The non-use of subtitles may also make the story difficult to follow.
You're hurt.
It's nothing. We must get to the roof.
Of course, I later realized that the sound on PS5 is preset to 3D audio, which is not an option for this game. Omen 2 offers stereo and surround sound, but after switching off 3D audio and plugging in my headphones, I was able to hear the voices quite fairly. I will still be faced with forever trying to understand the change of Legacy of Kain's lore. Kain's weakness in Omen 2 seems to conflict with the lore of power in aging. If Vorador is stronger as an elder vampire, then Kain sleeping for a long time shouldn't make him any weaker. On the contrary, I would see him as getting even stronger, as rest gives Kain strength and sanctuary of the first game. The sanctuary spell enables me to travel to my crypt, from which the soul of my grave provides me respite. I often resort to this when I am weak and need nourishment. It is made clear in the lore that vampires do not evolve from experience, nor devolve from rest. Vampires are stronger when they maintain their comfort. This means they avoid what weakens them and seek to feed on others. It's sort of odd to think of Kain now being weaker over time, but I suppose the battle directors wanted to go a more challenging route with the combat, just to keep the game from being too easy. However, if we're playing the role of a character who is supposed to be OP by now, then it may have been better to have a story about how Kain lost his powers before one of him restoring them. Overall, from a visual standpoint, the game could be a decent follow-up to the original. The character/world art and sound design makes me believe that this is Blood Omen continued. But I didn't even finish the game, due to its puzzling boss battles and binding combat system. This trilogy should also be called the Raziel series, because every story beat after Soul Reaver 1 has more to do with Raziel than with Kain. Do you think Blood Omen 2 is a true sequel? I'm not wild about the game myself, but I'm glad I got to see what it was like. I remember being excited about this game even more than playing Soul Reaver 2. Neither of them did I get the chance to play, but maybe I didn't miss out as much as I had thought. I hope you enjoyed this review of Legacy of Kain Blood Omen 2. The review was written on December 9, 2024, and the video was published on December 24th, 2024. This is As Cliff Recalls Righteous Gaming. Hope to see you next time.